Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Chatham Township Committee meeting for Thursday, October 26, 2017. Greg, has adequate notice been given?
Yes, adequate notice of this meeting of the Township Committee was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice was given to both the Chatham Courier and the Morris County Daily Record on January 6, 2017. Notice was posted on the bulletin board in the main hallway of the municipal building on January 6, 2017, and notice was filed with the Township Clerk on January 6, 2017.
Thank you. Would you please stand for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Solin?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schwartz said she would be absent. Mayor Ritter?
Here. Do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to reports. Sorry, Foon?
No reports.
All right, Mike?
Yes, Mayor, thank you very much. From the DPW, I can report that the skate park repairs are ahead of schedule, and the skate park is expected to be open by this weekend. So unless something surprising comes up in the way of repairs tomorrow, it should be open for business over the weekend. And number two, the compactor over at the recycling center has been in operation now for about a month. It's still during its kind of testing period, so asking people's patience as they get used to the new flow at the recycling center for the compactor, but it does seem to be doing its intended job of reducing the number of pickups and the expense on that front. And then just an end of the season reminder for community gardeners that for those who do have plots at the garden, now's the time to submit your applications and your dues payment in order to reserve your garden plot for next season. And for those gardeners out there who would like to have a plot next season, please go to the website, the Chatham Township website, and click on committees and community garden, and read the rules and guidelines, and also then fill out the application and send it in. The available garden plots will be assigned right after the first of the year. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Joe?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. The Historical Society had their annual meeting, and just want to congratulate Martha Wells, who will be taking over as the president of the Historical Society. For many years, both Pat and Martha have served as co-presidents. Martha now will take over alone. They've both done a tremendous job. We had a tremendous presentation on the Jersey Shore, a guest speaker who came in and talked about the history of the Jersey Shore, literally from top to bottom. It's rather fascinating, as I've mentioned many times. These are fascinating meetings, great speakers. I invite everyone to come out, and you're guaranteed to learn something. And I'd also like to announce a new member of the board of the Historical Society, our own Mr. Tom Salvis. And thank you for serving, Tom, and thank you for willing to serve, and thank you for all the service that both Pat and Martha have given to the Historical Society. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Just two items to report. The first is the Chatham Township Fire Department is in desperate need of volunteers for their tree sales that are coming up around the Christmas season here. If anyone has an interest in volunteering and helping them out, work the weekends where they sell these Christmas trees over on River Road, it'd be greatly appreciated. You can reach out to Ron Icart at ron.icart, ICART1 and we'll be sure to post this to the Facebook page as well and on the website. Everyone knows what a great job our volunteer fire department does for our township, and if anyone can offer their support, if you don't want to volunteer as a firefighter and run into burning buildings, this is another alternative where you can stand outside in the cold and help them sell Christmas trees. So please consider giving your time on their behalf. The second, also related to the Chatham Township Fire Department to some respect, is the 9th annual Chatham Turkey Trot will be held again this year in the Highland section of the township itself on Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving morning. Registration is now open. You can go to the ChathamTurkeyTrot.org to register. It's $25 for the 5K and $20 for the family fun run. As I said, it's a 9th annual event taking place here in the township. It's It's become a holiday tradition for everyone to kick off the holiday season, raising funds for both the Chatham Township Fire Department as well as the Diabetes Research Institute. Over the past 9 years, we've successfully raised over $100,000 with the support of many of the residents and local businesses. So if you have an interest in getting out there and running, please do so. John is out today, so we'll pass the baton over to Tom.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with what John would have reported on if he were here. The Woodland Road walkway project, I think, is nearing completion. The walkway is actually in use. The last I saw, there were a couple of utility poles that still needed to be relocated. I think they've all been done. There might be one more to still move.
They removed
still
one.
two?
There's two left.
Okay. And the shoulders of the roadway itself are to be milled and paved, tentatively scheduled to start on Monday. And weather permitting, that'll go on. Shouldn't take more than a couple of days. To report some additional preliminary information about the 2018 budget. The state has certified that the budget cap for 2018 will be 2.5%. On the agenda tonight, you have a resolution, if you approve it, authorizing us to switch our employee dental coverage from Delta Dental to the State Health Benefits Plan, Delta Dental Plan. Making that move promises to save us upwards of about $25,000 per year. And previously mentioned that the added assessments for 2017 were looking good. We now have an official number, and it's just over $51 million. To help people understand the significance of that, it's always better, of course, to be adding ratables than to be losing them. But it does not have that tremendous of an influence, keeping in mind that our total ratable base is over $3 billion. Adding 51 million to that certainly is a positive, but it's not, it's not like the thing that makes or breaks our budget. For example, if you go back and you look at the budget documents that we've posted for the 2017 year and look at the levy cap calculation, you'll see that in 2016, at the end of 16/4/17, the total increase in ratable values was just over 44 million, a little bit under 45. And when you apply our tax rate of 0.262 to that, that generated $117,000 in new taxation, new revenue. That's against 8.5 million. So again, you see that it's a plus. You don't want to be on the negative side. There are municipalities that have really struggled, particularly those that are heavily dependent on commercial properties or rental apartments where values have declined, and they're constantly dealing with tax appeals and losing ratables. That's a situation that we don't face here. We were able to, successfully make it through the worst of the economic downturn, and we've had positive growth every year. So I don't want to minimize and say that it's not important to us. It certainly is, but it is not what builds our surplus. It is not what keeps our tax rate down. There are other things that go with it, and it's fairly simple math. You all know the drill. We've been through it before. It's revenues and expenditures, and we have done a good job of holding the line on both of those. We've mentioned previously that when you look at the police department as an example, the salaries in the police department are the same today as they were 10 years ago. Now, that's not because people didn't get raises. It's because we've reduced the number of police officers. We're down from 24 to 21. That's a significant drop, and most towns have not been able to do that. Our police are quite professional, and they've been able to absorb that loss and continue to do a great job. Public Works has pretty much stayed status quo. The administrative offices, we actually went in the last 10 years from 15 full-time people in this building and a number of part-timers, particularly the subcode inspectors. We now only have 9 full-time administrative staff in this building. So it's those things. It's the changes in insurance. It's a variety of things that you've all helped with over the time that you've been on the Township Committee. And this is the time of year now that we're gearing up for next year, and I wanted to, again, just lay the groundwork so that everybody understands the full picture and doesn't, cherry pick things to talk about.
Great, thank you, Tom. Chief?
Just have two public service announcements. Reminder that this Saturday is the National Prescription Drug Take-Back Day. We have two locations, one police headquarters and one at Hickory Square Shopping Center in front of the CVS, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. All prescription medication, it can be left in its original container. We just ask that there be no depositing of syringes. And the second is...
Chief, regarding that one, could
Yes.
you speak a little bit about that program and if you would recommend that we promote that on our Facebook and social media pages and elsewhere?
Well, it's the drug diversion program is the effort to take unused prescription medication out of your medicine cabinets, out of your cabinets, and putting it into a properly disposing them so they don't get into the hands of the wrong people. Certainly those that are opioid based. As well as we have the prescription drop box at headquarters that's open really 24/7, 365, that can be used at any time.
And from
Again, medication can be left in its original container. It's not inventoried. No one is going to look at, who has what medication. It's dumped in, no questions asked. There'll be an officer at each location to answer any questions that anybody has.
All right, so we probably should promote this on our social media
Yeah,
channels
sure.
and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's significant enough to promote.
Yeah, it's this Saturday from 10 to 2, regardless of the weather.
Great.
And the second one is the Chatham Township PBA 170 annual trunk or treat is going to be held again this year at Chatham High School in the parking lot from 2 to 4. Costume parade will commence at 2:15. The PBA just asked that if you're going to participate, that you drop an email off to one of the officers. You can find that on the website, www.ctpd.net, right on the front page. Just drop them, let them know if you're coming, if you're using a car, and how many kids you're coming, or how many kids are coming, because they asked that you bring at least one piece of candy for every kid. This Saturday.
Kids, great.
That's it. And that's it. Wear a costume.
Thank you,
Any
Chief.
questions?
All right, it's now our opportunity to open this up for the hearing of citizens. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are not topics scheduled for public hearing tonight. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, Susan Hoag, 78 Canterbury Road, Briarwood Coach Site. Some of you may have seen me at the planning board on Monday. I'm here representing the Briarwood Coach Site Community Association Board, of which I am a member. And I have some questions about, or requests about the Dixie-Dale property and its development plan. The lawyer for Sterling Properties mentioned that at this point, 30% was expected to be developed, 40% kept in open space. My assumption is that that which they are keeping in open space is already probably the most steep sloped areas in the property, which would make it difficult to develop in the first place. I'm not sure. Didn't show on the plan. Having been on the Open Space Committee for 18 years and written the open space plan that's part of the master plan, I request that whoever is working with Sterling do whatever they can to preserve as much of the undeveloped property as possible. You've got 30% more than what is currently being listed as developed, and I really encourage you to preserve all that is possible to be preserved. to minimize any further development on that property. And I do this not only for Chatham Glen, I say this for Chatham Glen, but I also have to say for the great horned owls that live on the property that you can hear down in Briarwood Coachlight. We want to preserve as much of that land as possible for their homeland. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank
Sue.
you.
And this will be a topic of conversation later on in the meeting today as well.
Yes, I know, I understand later on, but that's more dealing with the ordinance that just is changing the zone. It doesn't really, I don't think, address the plan itself. I just want to go on record.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, hi. I'm Dot Stillinger, Chatham Township Environmental Commission. Thank you for hearing me tonight. A couple of things I wanted to bring to your attention. The first is some information about Long Hill Township. As you probably know, the Long Hill Township sewage treatment plant is failing and has been for a long time. They are discharging a certain amount of raw sewage into the Passaic River. The Passaic River in Chatham Township flows through people's backyards on River Road and flows through people's backyards in Chatham Glen. So the fact that their sewage treatment plant is failing has implications for us. But that's not what I'm going to mention. Long Hill understands that to upgrade their sewage treatment plant to state requirements is going to cost $40 million over 20 years. Well, that's a lot of money, and they have come up with an innovative solution. They are selling their sewage treatment plant to New Jersey American Water. Now, stop me if you've heard about this. You've heard about it?
Well, I have not, but you know that.
Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen what the terms of that agreement are and whether the sewer charges for citizens, what those new charges will be. But the Long Hill Township Committee is 100% in favor of doing this. It solves their problem and isn't costing them anything. It may cost residents something, but that's still to be determined. It occurred to me that thinking about shared services at a somewhat higher level, would that be something that Chatham Township might want to consider? Now, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, I
Are
understand.
you interested in buying it, Dot?
What's that?
Are you interested in buying the sewer treatment plant? We can talk.
Well, we might want to get some donors together and raise money. But it occurred to me that, as I understand it, the Chatham Township sewage treatment plant has been repaired, but there were some questions about whether it was going to be upgraded or not. And I understood that it was not going to be upgraded, but it was going to be fixed. However, going forward, there may be more things that need to be fixed, and people may end up needing to upgrade it. It occurred to me that maybe we would want to consider selling our sewage treatment plant to New Jersey American Water also, and maybe trying to negotiate a deal, a package deal with Long Hill, because it has always seemed to me that Long Hill should be our sister town. They're just upstream from us, and we should be doing more things. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. It seemed to me that it was an idea worth watching, and the Environmental Commission, will keep an eye on what the charges to residents are and how it works out and so forth. But I wanted to bring this to your attention.
Thank you, Dot.
Now, the other, I do have
Can
one
I,
other.
before you move on to your second subject, just tell you that that is something that I have in the past looked at and continue to have on my radar. I've had discussions with
Good.
New Jersey American Water. We've had meetings about it, but we haven't gone very far down the path.
No, there's no pressing need right now for it.
Not for us. There's
But-
not, no.
But it could
And
be.
our treatment plant is not failing, and it's in.
No, not now. Now we're up to code. because now we're discharging everything into the Passaic River where the standards are lower. Before, we were discharging sewage into the Great Swamp,
No,
and they wouldn't
we
let us
we
do
were
it.
never just, no, we never discharged sewage, Dot. It was
Treated
sewer
wastewater.
effluent, right.
Treated
And the issue, just so that there's, people are not confused by what's being said, the issue for us was total dissolved solids, which is basically salts, as you know, and frequently the tap water that we get from New Jersey American Water exceeds the standards for the Clean Water Act because
There's an
of the
issue around
discharging
that,
into federal
yeah.
waters.
Yeah.
So the difference is by going to the Passaic River, we don't have to meet the federal standard, which was impossible for us to meet and would have been exorbitantly expensive. The basic solution to that would have been to do a reverse osmosis treatment at the Tanglewood plant, and the operations of that and the residue that's left from it would have been a nightmare, not to mention the exorbitant cost. So we were able to avoid that. Ultimately, it winds up in the Passaic River anyway. This just puts it there at a closer distance and without that overbearing burden on trying to meet a TDS standard that really isn't rooted in any science anyway.
But the bottom line effect was that now less pollution is, of any kind, salt especially, is not being discharged into the Great Swamp. So
Yeah,
it's a
well,
win-win
an absolute
for
winner.
everybody.
I think it was a great thing that we
Right.
did.
Right. And I might mention that Chatham Township gets its drinking water from the Passaic River. So everything that gets dumped into it has to be taken out again at the treatment plants down near Little Falls. But the other thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to ask what the state of the Pilgrim Pipeline ordinance is. Now, I think it's a mistake for people not to come and make remarks about the Pilgrim Pipeline. It needs to be kept in the forefront of people's minds. It is still a definite threat. And I wanted to mention that people in Chatham, anybody in Chatham Township who has a backyard that backs up to a power line right of way will also end up their yard will back up to an oil pipeline if the Pilgrim Pipeline goes through, because in Chatham Township, the route of the Pilgrim Pipeline is right along the power lines. And backing up to the power lines is kind of nice if you have a backyard that does that, because you have open space in your backyard and you have wildlife. But you probably don't want an oil pipeline there. Now, the people who would be most affected would be people with backyards on Hampton Road. There are an awful lot of houses on Hampton Road that back up to the power lines. People on Pine Street, Floral Street, Maple Street, Shunpike, their backyards back up to the power line right of way, and they would have an oil pipeline in their backyard. The pipeline would go pretty close to the Southern Boulevard School, and of course along the edge of the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. So my question is, how is that ordinance coming along?
It's coming along swimmingly, actually. John is still working on finessing the language. As you know, we had one of the original ordinances on this issue under Kevin's leadership and Albert's leadership a couple years ago now, and we're looking to strengthen it and hopefully have it set for introduction the next meeting or before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year,
That's our intention.
to bring it for a first reading?
Well, right now we've got two scheduled meetings for the end of the year, November 9th and then December 14th.
Okay, so you think you'll pass it before the end of the year, or at least
That's-
bring it up?
We'd like to have it passed before the end of the year.
Pass it before the end of the year. That
Correct.
is wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come forward? Seeing no one else come forward, we'll close the hearing of citizens. We'll now move on to final adoption of two ordinances. The first is ordinance 2017-13, ordinance of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, repealing chapter, 19 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Chatham, titled Streets and Sidewalks, and replacing with a new chapter 19, also titled Streets and Sidewalks, to regulate road opening permits. We spoke about this last meeting. Anyone would like to come forward to speak on this ordinance? Any discussion among the committee members?
No?
All right,
Good.
call for a vote. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved?
Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Solon?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes. Our second ordinance for final adoption is ordinance 2017-14. This is the ordinance of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, accepting deed of conservation easement for Block 20, Lot 15, at 43 Susan Drive. We'll open up for a hearing of citizens. Anyone like to come forward? Any comments or discussion among the committee members?
No.
Or a motion to approve?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Solon?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes. We'll move on now to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the consent agenda?
I want to just comment about our dental plan and congratulate Tom on his work because it sounded too good to be true at first. But Tom, maybe you can give the details again, but basically, as I said to Tom, the employees are getting a better plan and it's costing less for the taxpayers of Chatham, and it's a win-win all around.
That's what I was going to say.
Well, there you have it. Good job. Good work.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, what it does is it provides the employees with additional choices. The Delta plan that we presently have is the Delta Premier, and that's a standard dental plan with pretty severe limits. There's a $1,000 a year limit of benefit. Dependents are cut off at age 19 unless they're a full-time student, and then they're cut off at 23. By switching to the state health benefits dental plan, our premiums are reduced by about 40% on average. And in addition to that standard type of plan, there are the equivalent of HMOs or PPOs. There are 5 different ones that are offered with substantially reduced premiums that are reduced by as much as 75% depending on which network the employee would choose. Now, the benefit obviously to the employee is twofold. One is that their portion of the premium is also reduced. Employees do pay 25% of the cost. So when we save money, the employee does as well because the premium is coming down. But with the DMOs, I think that's what they're called, there's no annual limit on the benefit. There's still co-pays and, still only pay usual and customary costs. But there's no annual limit at all if you use one of the network providers. And that becomes the key, is for the employees to find dentists that they're satisfied with within those networks. The other part of this is that it tracks along with the health care requirement that dependents are eligible for coverage until age 26. So those are the enhancements for the employees. There's additional choices in which they can save substantially more money while at the same time enhancing their benefit. And as I said, we will reduce our cost by about 40% on average.
Great. Thank you again, Tom, for your hard work and saving money for the township. Greg, do you want to read the consent agenda for everyone?
This evening, we have Resolution 2017-184, receipt of reports, 2017-185, approving meeting minutes, 2017-186, releasing escrow balances, 2017-187, amending Resolution 2017-183, and 2017-188, authorizing participation in state health benefits dental plan.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. Second it.
Mr. Solon?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes. Moving on now to our discussion item, which is the rezoning of Dixie-Dale Farm Property, Block 66, Lot 1. As everyone is familiar with, I'm sure, those of you here this evening, the planning board met recently to discuss this item. So before we begin our discussion, we're going to ask that Tom offer us some color in terms of the conversation that took place at the planning board, and then our attorney council. Albert Cruz is going to provide us a bit of a calendar and timeline in terms of how the committee is going to approach this over the course of the remainder, a couple of months here in the year.
Okay. Mayor, I'll keep my comments very brief, just to let you know what actually transpired at the planning board meeting. There were two things that were considered by the planning board. The first was the rezoning of what we are referring to as the Dixie Dale Farm property, to rezone it to from one family, single family use to multifamily, and creating that as what would be known as the R6C district. It would provide for the redevelopment of that parcel to accommodate 25 duplexes, a total of 50 units, along with the restoration and preservation of the existing mansion, with the reuse of the first floor as a clubhouse and the upper second and third floor to be the home of 4 condominiums. So you would have a total of 54 dwelling units. The planning board considered that ordinance and took formal action to recommend that the Township Committee adopt that ordinance. So we're here tonight now to review or discuss the ordinance, the draft of the ordinance that was endorsed by the planning board. The second thing that was discussed was the redevelopment plan for the skate park. And the planning board did not take formal action on that pending the receipt by the developer of the letter of interpretation from DEP that would delineate how much of the site can actually be used to make certain that the redevelopment plan that is being discussed, the concept plan, works. So until that LOI is received, the planning board deferred action on the redevelopment plan. So they did take action to recommend the zoning ordinance. There's one piece of the zoning ordinance that you'll see on the very last page that was added subsequent to the planning board meeting, and that has to do with some language regarding the adaptive reuse of the mansion building. With that, I don't think I have more to say. That captures, I think, in a nutshell, what's going on there.
Great, thank you. Albert?
Mr. Mayor, just to review a couple of prior events, even prior to those that the administrator discussed. On November 10, 2016, the Township Committee referred the Dixie Dale Farm rezoning request to the Planning Board. This referral was done at a public meeting of this committee. On March 20, 2016, the Planning Board considered the rezoning request as part of a master plan reexamination after public hearing. The reexamination report was then adopted again at a public meeting. On October 16, 2016, the Planning Board considered a rezoning ordinance for the Dixie Dale Farm and has referred that ordinance back to the Township Committee. That action by the Planning Board was done in a public meeting. Tonight, the Township Committee is discussing that ordinance as recommended by the Planning Board with, as the administrator said, an additional section added at the end dealing with the adaptive reuse of the existing manor house. This meeting is, of course, a public meeting. Proceeding forward, I'd like to outline what the procedural steps are. Once the rezoning ordinance is introduced by the Township Committee, the ordinance will be referred back to the Planning Board for determination that the ordinance is not inconsistent with the master plan. This occurs even where the ordinance has, as in this case, originated at the Planning Board and referred to this committee. The Planning Board has 35 days within which to make an inconsistency determination and return the ordinance to the Township Committee. This is done at a public hearing. However, the Planning Board may conduct its review prior to 35 days. If that occurs, then the Township Committee may hold a public hearing sooner than 35 days. At that point, the Township Committee holds a public hearing on the ordinance. After the public hearing, the Township Committee may take action on the ordinance. If the ordinance is adopted, it becomes effective upon publication filing with the Morris County Planning Board. This timeline begins once the Township Committee makes the initial decision of introducing the ordinance. And the dates were previously, I think, may have been mentioned by the mayor. If you're going to, my understanding is that this will be a discussion tonight. On November 9th, it will be considered for introduction. You'll refer it back to the planning board, and during that period between the 9th and your December meeting, if the planning board so decides, it can be returned back with a determination regarding consistency with the master plan.
Right, so we could, in fact, if all things go accordingly, by the end of the year, have approved this ordinance.
Correct.
And is the intention to have the developer or anyone come in at the next meeting or the subsequent meeting to answer questions as well?
Whatever the committee's desire is.
Okay.
Typically, at an introduction, there is no public comment. That is saved for the
Final
public-
adoption like we had
For the
tonight.
public hearing. Now, if you may choose to have the developer come at the introduction, or you may have him, he may come at the public hearing. It's your choice.
Okay. As a point of clarification, I know the developer was at the planning board meeting, and he showed some slides of conceptual designs. I know there's a lot of talk in the community and concerns about the designs, this, that, or the other. Just a point of clarification, those were conceptual designs, nothing's final in terms of what was laid out, be it the roadways, or if there's clarification on the roadways onto Hillside, or the size of the structure by the skate park.
That's correct. The only thing that was presented was a concept plan. You know, it's anticipated, I would expect, I mean, the full engineering to do an actual plan hasn't been done. That's an expensive proposition that you don't undertake until you're actually ready to move forward with a formal application to the board. So the endorsements that have occurred at this point, I think, gives the developer, you know, sufficient comfort to be able to now go ahead to that next step and begin to finalize the concept plan and turn it into an actual development plan. When that happens, the planning board gets a shot at virtually all of it. You know, it's going to have to comply with the bulk requirements that are going to be in the ordinance that you ultimately adopt, assuming that you do. But all of those other site issues are going to be discussed in public. There'll be plenty of input from members of the planning board. Things like the roadways, the concept that has been presented so far provides, I think, for one main drive-through, an entrance on Hillside with an exit coming also at the other end on Hillside. But the concept did show some other internal roadways and driveway cuts, but they're not other driveways that are not actual driveway cuts. They're for emergency access. Because you need to
So
be
they
able
will
to-
not be, right now.
They will
at
not
least.
be through streets.
That was a
They'll be-
major
Yeah, as of right now, what was represented is that those were intended to provide emergency access for ambulances, fire trucks, police, but not traffic through the site. So those kinds of things, all those things are issues that the planning board will take up with the developer once we see a real application.
So once it's approved on our end, it goes back to the planning board. What role will the committee have in terms of, you know, dictating or outlining what is it the planning board's job to then determine
Yeah, it'll be-
size, scope, this, that, and the other
yes, it'll
versus
be
the
the-
committee? Or does it come back to the committee
It
afterwards?
does
or
not come back to the committee. Once you do the ordinance, and then the other piece is the redevelopment plan for the skate park site, once you do those things, I think you're essentially done with this. The redevelopment plan, you'll still be involved, I think, in negotiating an agreement on that. But the planning board is tasked with approving or disproving the application for development. So all of those technical issues and design standards and waivers and sidewalks and roadways and all of that is the planning board's jurisdiction, and that does not come back here.
I assume there will be a traffic study, they will look into all the impacts and, you know, everything.
I'm not going to
Full-blown,
assume anything or represent
analysis.
anything. The planning board, you know, makes the call on how much they need from the professionals to complete an application.
If I may just add, this is no different than any other zoning ordinance that you adopt. You adopt the legal framework for the development. The planning board does all the detailed work of review of the plans. By adopting a zoning ordinance, or later on, if you consider a redevelopment plan, you're not approving a development. That is still the work of the planning board. Just like in any other development, the ordinance that you're discussing tonight is nothing more than an amendment to your existing ordinance, adding an additional district. Once that ordinance is in place, if the developer chooses to move forward, it makes an application to the planning board. And that application takes its normal course, like any other application that it comes before the planning board, with notice, public hearings, and the back and forth between the developer and the planning board. So again, you're not approving anything through an adoption of an ordinance. That is the role of the planning board.
Thank you for that clarification for everyone. Any other discussions regarding this?
So the time factor is that, just again, like any ordinance, if you introduce it, you have to have the public hearing and final vote in the same year, or else you have to start over again the next year and reintroduce it.
That's correct. And I think, one of the reasons that we're looking at a schedule that would have you introduce on November 9th, forward it to the planning board. The planning board has a meeting on November 20th where they could consider it, and if they make a determination that it is not inconsistent with the master plan, it could come back here for public hearing and adoption on December 14th. If that doesn't happen, if for some reason the time frame just, gets garbled, you would have time to do another special meeting before the end of the year if necessary. If it carries to the beginning of the new year, we have to start over. And one of the reasons I think that it was advisable to wait until November 9th is, as you know, and Mr. Sellon certainly knows, there's a special election on November 7th to fill the balance of the term of one of these seats. It could be that on November 9th, there's a different person sitting here. So to have a vote with the membership of the body changing, I don't think is the best idea. So I think that schedule works, and hopefully we can stay on track.
The normal procedure is to have the public hearing, not at the introduction, but have it at the next meeting and possibly followed by...
That's just not the normal procedure. That's what's legally required.
Okay.
You have an introduction and a public hearing.
Right. In this situation, if we, can we anticipate and possibly avoid a timing problem if we have an additional public presentation to coincide with the introduction date on the 9th? And I guess the thought that I have is that if we wait until the December meeting to have the public hearing, if we hear input at that meeting that leads us to want to amend the ordinance, does that destroy any chance of getting it through in that form? Basically, you would have to amend it, send it back to the planning board to have them look at it a second time and then start over from scratch the next year? Or can we possibly avoid that potential problem by having a presentation by the developer on the 9th to coincide with all the comments that the public that would like to make at that time? It's still at its introductory stage. If there is a reason that we agree that it needs an amendment, we could do it right then and send an amended ordinance draft back to the planning board for them to review, so that we could keep to the schedule that we're talking about.
As I said a moment ago, it's, I think, your choice whether you want to have a public presentation on the 9th or during the public hearing after the second reading. Certainly, a lot of what you have said does make sense, because again, technically, once you introduce an ordinance, unless it is a non-material or non-substantive change, you would have to give notice of the amended ordinance and have a new public hearing on that. So in essence, it re-triggers the start of the various time periods. But again, that's the committee's choice as to how you want to proceed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intention, at least from my perspective, I think Mike's as well, is to, this has been a topic of conversation for many months over the past year and change now. And obviously we want to move this along. And I think if we could have the developer here to give a presentation, maybe something similar to the planning board, but offer another opportunity for residents to hear conceptually what's being proposed.
And that would be at the November 9th meeting?
It would be the November meeting, whether or not it's the 9th or the 8th, which is another discussion item after this. we can determine that. But yes.
So Albert, just from your legal perspective, that meeting, if we have the presentation by the builder, you're saying the public hearing would be at the next meeting, the December meeting. So the presentation is a presentation. How do we handle the public? Are we allowed? Are we to have public comment, or does the public get to see the presentation and come back 2 weeks later and put in your public comments at the public hearing? How does that work?
You can't have the public hearing the same night that you introduce it, but you do have two sections in your standard agenda for public comment. You have, at the very beginning of the meeting, hearing of citizens.
Right.
They can speak there. Then you have the next section deals with public hearings regarding ordinances. That ordinance would not be listed there. You also have a hearing of citizens at the end. So there are at least two opportunities to, for the public to speak, not at a public hearing,
Right.
but speak and be heard.
So they'll be
on
able to
the-
speak on the first night as well as on the introduction night,
And the
conceptually at the end where you can have a public discussion about anything, as well as at the official public hearing.
Correct, but those two sessions are not considered public hearings. But obviously, there are opportunities for
Right.
the public to
be
speak
heard.
on any topic that they desire.
So I would suggest or recommend, after we give our reports, as we normally do, have the presentation, then we have the hearing of citizens.
Yeah, if I may, I'm a little bit concerned about that process. As Mr. Cruz just pointed out, the public, and as Mayor Sullivan pointed out, the public can speak at any one of these meetings. In fact, Mayor Hoag already did. She's already made comments on this ordinance and made a suggestion and a request with regards to how the portion of the site that is not developed be preserved. You consider some mechanism to make sure that it's permanently preserved. So that process has already begun. That process also has already begun at the planning board. The planning board took, comments and questions from people that were interested in the concept plan. The problem I have is that I want to make sure that we maintain clarity about the process. And you, as we just discussed 5 minutes ago, you are not going to approve the development plan. That's the job of the planning board. Your job is going to be to deal with this ordinance. So I'm not sure what you want the developer to do. You want him to come in and present the concept plan again, simply to marry the two together, to say, if you adopt this ordinance, this is the kind of plan that this ordinance would allow us to develop. I think at this point, there's no mystery to it anymore. It's out there. It was presented to the planning board twice. They came in almost a year ago with a concept plan, came and received comment and made changes to that concept as a result of the first presentation. They came back, they presented it again. I certainly don't object to them coming here, but it's not normally part of the process, I think, that you would go through to consider changing the zoning.
No,
I think you all understand what this zoning ordinance will allow, and our job is to make sure the public understands what this zoning ordinance will allow, but it's not to consider the development plan.
No, I can understand that it's not ordinary perhaps, but it's not an ordinary thing every day where we also rezone a parcel of land like this, then I would think they would do us the courtesy of speaking to this governing body as it relates to their plan as we vote on this ordinance.
I have a question, Mayor, for Albert probably. So now, what happens if we go through this process, everything goes through the way we projected and planned, and this gets approved by the end of the year or maybe in January sometime. But so developer starts incurring cost of presenting all these things to get approval from the planning board. What happens at some point? It wouldn't make sense anymore for them to proceed with the project, and so we're changing our ordinance, accommodating this project. And so, what is the worst case scenario? What could happen? Or we just have it amended ordinance and no project, or just get your opinion on that.
An ordinance is a piece of legislation. You can change it. If you decide to do something else that's something more appropriate there. Obviously, during the course of the life of any development, developers have to make choices as to whether proceeding or not. So if the developer makes the choice not to proceed forward.
But there's no commitment. We're not getting any commitment at this point when approval is not contingent upon developer is committing to the project.
Well, what the ordinance does provide, what the ordinance does provide, it ties development at Dixie-Dale with the skate park because
Bless you.
there's a component, the affordable housing generated by this development has to be either met on this property or at the skate park. So there is, if the developer wants to proceed with this ordinance, then and have no affordable housing on this property, then the skate park is being developed. So there is a process that will be followed once the ordinance, if it's adopted, to formalize what will occur at Dixie-Dale and at the skate park.
Okay.
Any other questions, discussion? Tom?
If I may just add one comment to that. If for some reason this development didn't happen, this developer pulled out, said, forget it, we're not doing it, the Township Committee would have the prerogative of leaving the new ordinance in place for another developer, or you could repeal it if you wanted to. Okay. And, change the zoning to something else, back to its original or whatever. But that would always be your prerogative. As long as the site is undeveloped and there's not a pending application, I think you can change it.
Mayor, I think it would help me to have the developer come back in and give a presentation. I think it always is helpful to see the conceptual results that would be tied to the language of an ordinance. So I think it would be one extra layer of clarification for us, and I think it would be a clarification for the audience as well. And I appreciate that it may not be a surprising new information, but I do think that the planning board meeting was not televised, so I think it would be a much bigger audience to have this presentation at the Township Committee and have it go out on the video and recorded on our website. I think that would be something to have for people to look at and absorb. And so I would ask that we invite the developer to come in at that introducty meeting to make a presentation at that time.
Yep. Preaching to the choir.
He's seen our latest TV ratings, clearly.
One of them.
I think the planning board, not the planning board, I'm sorry, when the developers came before the planning board, they certainly alluded to the fact that they would be more than happy and willing to come before this committee and do the presentation again, if that was our desire. So I would agree with you, Mike. I don't have a problem with it. They could certainly give the presentation, give more opportunity for comment. But understanding, knowing what Tom and Albert were pointing out about the zoning is really the issue here.
Well, I think that's the important thing that everyone needs to understand, the residents need to understand. We do the legislation, the planning board deals with the design and everything else.
So, yeah, the
So-
9th is there, so I don't think we're under any time constraints. I was going to say, is there any need to introduce it tonight to give more time opportunity to, if we had to?
No, the answer is no, you're not under any constraint. And we did, both the administrator and I mentioned that there is a new section, an adaptive reuse section for the Manor House, and the professional planner this afternoon recommended minor changes to that, which would be incorporated into whatever ordinance you did.
Right. So we can get reach out to them tomorrow and see if they can get here at the next meeting?
If that's the consensus of the committee.
It's a consensus with
I
three
will
of
do
us.
that.
I agree
Typhoon's
with-
going to
yeah,
think
I
differently,
agree.
so.
Yep.
Yeah. So if we could do that, that would be great. And then the ordinance itself will be part of our agenda next time, which can be found on our website, as all people should know.
And you all have a draft now, a final draft, so go through it between now and then, if you have any comments or questions that you want things. I'm sorry, you all have a draft of the ordinance now. The latest version should have been distributed to you when you got here this evening. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, please go through it. If there's any comments or questions, if there's anything that's not clear, let us know. It obviously can be amended right up until the time you actually introduce it, and then it can be amended again after a public hearing. But what you have in front of you is what we're recommending for introduction, but it's still subject to change before you actually vote on it.
Great. All right, I guess the second discussion item, not on the agenda, but something I had passed around to the committee earlier today, is the fact that November 9th is the next meeting. It's a Thursday, obviously, for those of you in the audience and those of you listening and watching at home. Those of you. November 9th is actually Veterans Day weekend, and the school system is off on Thursday and Friday. So not only will I not be here for the 9th meeting, but I suspect maybe other families or parents or residents may not be in town. So I was going to propose a suggestion to move the meeting to November 8th, a Wednesday, the day prior, not only to accommodate my schedule, but to accommodate other schedules of other individuals who may have plans to be out of town on those subsequent days. So that's my suggestion. Anyone have any thoughts, concerns? We're all available besides Greg on the 8th.
It works for me. If that benefits everybody else, that would be fine by me.
I'm flexible. I just want to make sure, Greg, our timing and our schedule and our announcements.
I can get it advertised. I can send that out tomorrow.
What time?
Same time, same channel.
That would be 7:30?
7:30, November 8th. Here.
In which case, I can arrange to be here if we have to move it to that Wednesday.
You can.
I'd rather be somewhere else, but I can arrange to be here if need be.
I won't, yeah.
I told Gregory 10 times today not to worry about it. We can survive without him for
That's
one
what I
night.
thought.
but
And I told Tom 10
he's-
times things
he's
get screwed up
dedicated.
when I'm not here,
He's
so.
dedicated.
I'm fine.
The only
Yeah.
concern I would have is that we're always on such a regular schedule of Thursdays that everyone seems to know in town. We meet every
Well, this is
other
the largest
Thursday.
turnout we've had in several months, and I suspect they all heard about it from the paper and everything else, and we will do our job to promote it. I suspect people out
No,
there.
I was gonna make
People
that
might, say we're trying to, pull wool over people's eyes and moving it to a different date. There's always those people out here in the community, but suffice to say, I think they can appreciate the reason we're moving it is because we know there could be a large number of residents who will be out of town on November 9th.
And we might want to invite the public who is here to let their friends and neighbors know if we're going to change the meeting date. So
I think everyone here could agree to go home tonight and send an email to their friends and their friends' friends and do a chain mail of their own to suggest and remind them that the meeting is going to be moved to November 8th at 7:30 here in the municipal building.
And we'll post that on.
And we'll post it to the social media channels, we'll post it to the web.
I can't help, I don't have any friends.
You can email me
We know
tonight. So we're in agreement, November 8th, 7:30 here. We'll have the builder or developer present the conceptual plans. All right, no other discussion? Anything else?
Mr. Cruz, do we have cause for executive session?
All right, well, we have the hearing of citizens still.
I do have a resolution.
We have one more hearing of citizens. Again, an opportunity for people to come forward. If anyone would like to come forward, please step forward. State your name and address for the record, please.
Alex Tayo, 288 Hillside. And just a few questions or comments on the Dixie-Dale lot. Looking through the meeting notes from 2014, I noticed a resolution potentially to purchase the land from the town. And then that was a closed session discussion afterwards. I didn't see any follow-ups from that. I'm curious if that is at all still on the plan or what happened from those discussions?
Those discussions did not lead to a purchase, obviously. At the time that we were considering the possible purchase of Dixie-Dale, we also had the opportunity to purchase the Giralda Farms property. We didn't have the resources to pursue both. We put our money into the Giralda Farms property, and subsequently the owners of Dixie-Dale found another purchaser.
And the dental plan savings, could that be applied? And then a second question on when you do get the developer to come and give the presentation, when you're evaluating, as you said, you're not evaluating the plan, they can move houses, roads, whatever, as long as it meets the rules of the ordinance that you pass. And so my understanding is you're going to approve or disapprove the ordinance, then it'll go back to the planning committee to see if to see if then the ordinance is in the master plan in alignment with that, and then you'll also vote on that, is my understanding, right? So there's a couple more votes coming. So on the vote you have now, the next vote, what are you evaluating or looking at? If not does it fit the master plan? What other aspects are you evaluating?
Isn't that the planning board?
I have to apologize. I don't understand your question.
Oh, okay. So after the rezoning plan either passes or doesn't, there's then another step, I thought, where it goes back to the planning board to see if it's consistent with the master plan?
The ordinance
Yeah.
is introduced here,
Mm-hmm.
then it's sent back to the planning board for a determination that it is not inconsistent with the master plan. If the planning board finds that it is not inconsistent with the master plan, it's returned to the committee. If the planning board finds that it is inconsistent with the master plan, the township committee can still adopt that ordinance as long as it adopts a detailed resolution explaining the reasons why it is proceeding forward even when it is inconsistent with the master plan. And that ordinance or that resolution is called a reasons resolution. It gives the reasons why, notwithstanding what the master plan says or doesn't say, the committee is moving forward with the ordinance.
Thank you. And last question, when it is introduced, is that a vote then, or is it just any committee member can introduce it and it goes to the planning board?
It is a motion to introduce the ordinance, and then it is voted upon as any other motion. It is not a substantive motion. It's a procedural motion to, in essence, place the question on the table to be considered at the next meeting after a public hearing.
So I guess that is then my question. On that procedural motion vote, is there anything you're considering, or is that, yeah, like how are you evaluating your vote?
As any other piece of legislation that comes before the Township Committee.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Hi, Tracy Ness, 31 Jeffrey Court, Chatham Township. When did we purchase Giralda Farms?
What was the question?
When did we purchase Giralda Farms?
At the end of December 2014. I think the closing was on December 28th.
And so
2014.
the discussions were going on with Dixie-Dale in 2014 as to whether we would purchase that land or not?
Yes.
And the decision was made because the funding, we bought 136 acres at Giralda Farms for roughly $14.1 million. And that was done in concert with Green Acres funds, with county funds, with our open space funds, with whoever else kicked in with those funding. What was the ultimate purchase price that the township paid, taking away the funding from the others' contributions?
I'm going to say I don't understand the question either. You're asking how much township money went into the
Correct.
purchase of Geralda Farms?
Correct.
I don't have that in front of me, but it was maybe $1 million. I just don't remember. If you want to call me tomorrow, I'll look it up for you.
Yeah, I was trying to deduct it from the,
Where are you heading with this? Maybe I
Yeah.
can help you get there.
So I was trying to
What's
figure
your
out
angle?
why, if we were paying, because I kind of netted out closer to $2 million. So if we were paying for 136 acres at Geralda Farms for what netted out to be 1 million, whatever, I'm not going to hold you to 1 million. What was the thing that caused us not to be able to form again with our partners who have been so willing to fund our purchase at Geralda, our purchase at
Okay, I think I get
Kirby,
it.
our purchase of whatever? So if it was $1 million, let's just say $1 million to us, whatever it is. So if it was $1 million to us in 2014, was there an opportunity to go back to our partners and say, since that was 3 years ago, and say, we don't want to lose the last farm that we have in Chatham Township, would you be willing again to go to the well, as you have been in the past, to help us purchase Dixie Dale and preserve it for the community? So $1 million is, $1 million, but it's not $14.1
Yeah,
million.
pretty soon you're talking about real money, right? But the problem at the time, Tracy, was that we had to make a decision about which application to pursue with the County Open Space Trust. And we were asking the county for $10 million.
Right.
Okay, we got $10 million, largest award by the county ever. I don't know if they'll ever do one like that again. We weren't in a position, or at least we didn't feel we were strategically, to be asking for funding on a second project at that same time. And then subsequently, some other things happened with ownership, and they went a different way. That's all. That's really all there was to it.
So is the sale has not been completed of Dixie Dale Farms. Obviously, it's contingent upon the rezoning efforts that we're considering here tonight. So the property would have to be rezoned to allow for that type of development, and the skate
Yeah,
park.
we're not going to talk about a contract. We have no idea what the terms of that contract are. It's a private matter. We don't know what the sale price is. That's not something that we're going to talk about.
So our purpose then in rezoning is strictly because we as a township and as a committee desire development at that site?
No. Come on, Trace. The main reason, and I think you already know the answer to this, is that it includes with it a very significant contribution to our affordable housing obligation on the part of the developer. That's what's driving this, okay? That's why this is a great deal for us.
And then my other question then is, when will we learn our affordable housing component? Because there's some concern that with the skate park being the only site that I'm aware of, I don't know, maybe there are, being zoned for affordable housing, and that's only 3.3 acres. If I read the documentation correctly on the township website, we're anywhere between, at this round, and I realize that we're in litigation, anywhere between 140 or 567 units, which was in the July 2016 document. So moving forward with rezoning and doing all of this that will allow that development, which we do have to, take care of our affordable housing component, are we putting the cart before the horse when we don't know what our affordable housing component is, and the land that we have may need to be rezoned at Dixie Dale, or the land may need to be reconsidered because there's issues with that site. I remember way back when we were talking about the skate park, that members on the committee were saying it was going to sink into the ground because it was a dump site before, and there's tailings underneath there, and the soil wasn't suitable. So would it be better if we waited to find out what our affordable housing component is, because I understand other towns already know that, before we go ahead and start changing our zoning laws, or introducing an ordinance
Chase, the negotiations and the development of the fair share plan are extremely complicated and
Yes.
have many moving parts to it,
Yes.
okay? We have not settled, we have not agreed on what our obligation is. That is the purpose of the litigation. If it ultimately goes to trial, a judge will determine what our obligation is. The Fair Share Housing Center has an idea of what that number should be for us. We have an idea of what that number should be.
Right.
And we are working diligently to try to come to a resolution of the whole issue. But it's way more complicated than we can do, in a few minutes that we can have this dialogue. And additionally, because it's litigation, it's really subject to, the confidentiality of executive session. So I can't even answer some of the stuff that you're trying to touch on, other than to try to assure you that we are not putting the cart before the horse. We are working diligently to get the best deal for Chatham Township that we can, and I'm confident that ultimately we will.
Okay, I'm just worried that as with 24 units not being a lot of units, given this spread,
That's a very subjective, thing to say. You don't know.
Tom, can you explain,
That's-
because it's all 100% affordable housing, the credit we get for it, it's not just 24?
Well, it's 24 rental units, so you get double credit, so they count as 48.
so they count as 48.
They
So
do.
if we have an existing complement of 90, the 48 would take us up to 138. If we net out at 140, then we're only 2 units short. If we net out at 200, then see, that's my concern, is that we don't know what our complement is. And if we have this opportunity with the developer to develop the site, and then we only say 24 units there.
Yeah, but
Are you
again,
saying you're suggesting affordable housing units at the Dixie Dale as well then, in addition?
I have no idea what we would end up doing. I know we're zoning Dixie Dale the ordinance before us is to zone Dixie Dale from 15 houses to 54 multifamily units.
You understand what's
And-
going on, right? The idea is we rezone it, Dixie Dale becomes these high-end townhouses. As they do that, then they are going to run, build, and operate the affordable housing complex, as it were, facility over by the skate park.
Yeah, I think we learned all that about that at the planning meeting.
Okay, I just want to make sure you understand.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, my question is not that. So just so
Okay.
you understand, my question is,
I wasn't sure.
no, my question is, are we putting the cart before the horse? You're saying
I'm
no.
going to say no again.
Because we don't know what our
There's no
affordable
cart.
housing complement
Yeah.
is, so that if we're proceeding with a plan that's going to say, we're going to develop these luxury units at this site, and then at the skateboard site, which has issues, potentially, we don't know when the DEP gets back to us, we're only saying 24 units. So and I'm not saying this isn't a good deal for the township, I'm just kind of thinking in a bigger picture kind of way, if we
Potentially as
don't
well.
know what the complement is, and we tell the developer, okay, good, 24 units, then where do we put the other units if it doesn't come down to that?
And again, I want to be very careful about how I say this, because I don't want to be misleading, but I also, we also have to hold some stuff back. Where this is heading is that every town winds up with an affordable obligation. The obligation is to provide the opportunity for the development of affordable housing. It's not to build it. I've said that before. We have no obligation to build anything. There are a variety of mechanisms under the rules by which you can provide the opportunity, whether it's through zoning, whether it's through overlay zoning, whether it's through market to affordable conversions, whether it's by allowing accessory apartments. There's a whole host of ways that you can provide the opportunity. What we don't know yet is what our realistic development potential is after we complete a vacant land analysis and we take out steep slopes and non-sewered areas and all those kinds of things come into play, as well as what then you wind up with, if you wind up with an unmet need. Okay, so you may wind up with an RDP, realistic development potential, that you can meet, and you subtract that from what your obligation is, and you have unmet need, and you have to have a plan that addresses how you meet that unmet need during the time period that's in play here.
Right.
Those are all the things that we don't know yet, but that we are working towards trying to resolve. And so I don't know how else to answer your question.
No, I think it's a good explanation of it, and I think it's a question for all of you to consider, which is if we don't know yet, then is it the right thing to do to pursue a course of action that will enable the sale of the property and the ordinances to go through, or do we wait? Just explain to me what the timing is in
I'm going
terms
to
of
stop you and
that.
just say yes. The answer is yes.
The answer is
It is a
yes
good
to-
thing to do.
It is.
We're gonna
So
get-
it's better to not know and
The
proceed.
the required set aside, when a developer is doing a project and has an affordable housing obligation, is 15% of the units
Right.
if they're market, 20% if they're rental.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get 24 for 54. Do the math. Is that a good deal for us or not?
Potentially, I don't know what
Well,
our
potentially,
exposure is.
what's 15% of
I can't tell you
54?
what, I can't tell you what a
It's
good
not
deal is or not
24.
if I don't know what our exposure is. That's leaving part
I
of the
just told you what the
equation.
exposure is. The exposure is if a 54-unit development would have an obligation to do 15% as affordables.
No, I mean
how
our
many is
total,
that?
I mean our total obligation. I mean our total obligation, whatever ends up getting handed down to us. So that's the missing part of the equation. But I understand what you're saying, so I just wanted to be clear on some of the concerns that I had as to, do we know what the total picture is?
Yeah,
And
again.
when are we going to know what the
Tracy, we-
total
we-
But
picture
that's
is?
with
what, that's
this.
what we've been grappling with.
Yeah.
I've been grappling with it for 15
Yeah.
years now. It's
been a long time.
It has been a
Mount Laurel
long
1,
time.
Mount Laurel
and
2,
there's,
and-
there may be a light at the end of the tunnel, or, it might be a freight train. I don't know.
Second question, if you'll allow me. We have $800,000 in Safe Walks to School sidewalk grants, $600,000 for Lafayette and Shunpike, and another $200,000 grant that we got a year ago. Where are we in the status with that, and when will that $600,000 grant be effectuated?
Yeah, I believe John gave an update on this probably about 2 meetings ago. You could probably see that online if you've been watching the website, but I'm sure Tom can give
Yeah,
you a further update.
I can give you a further update. We're really no further along. The delay on this has been at the state end. With the use of the federal funds, John Rushke is now permitted to be the design engineer on the project. You have to use a pre-approved, state-selected engineering firm to do the design and then oversee the construction. That's what we're waiting for. They still haven't done that.
In 2 years, we
that's
haven't been able to
correct.
get an engineer?
Not us, the state.
I'm
They
just- I'm
have
not
the
saying-
engineers.
Tracy,
They haven't, they
Tom,
apparently
please
haven't.
clarify that. Please clarify for Tracy,
Yeah.
who we're waiting for here?
We're waiting for the state to approve the engineer's plan and scope of contract, scope of project in order to move forward. When we wound up doing the field inspections, well after the grant had been authorized, we actually met in the field with DOT and with the prospective engineer and took a look at the project. Upon doing so, they made a determination that the intersection at Shunpike/Watchung and Lafayette also was going to require upgrades for handicapped accessibility
Correct.
ramps, probably reconfiguring the traffic signals. So that changed the scope of the project. They indicated a willingness to also fund that. So it's actually even more than what's actually been awarded to date. But we have been pressing them to get this resolved, to get the engineer on board, get the design going, get it out to bid and construct it. I don't know whether we're going to run into the same issues with the Shunpike grant, but I suspect we will. So I don't know when it's going to get built. It should have been built already, but the delay is not at our end.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Derek Gardella, and I'm a resident of Hillside Avenue. I just had I'm sorry? Oh, 155. I had a question. I live in the borough. I had a question just about traffic studies and the traffic impact of the rezoning and what you have already considered as a result of that. Just because obviously putting duplex unit, 54 duplex units versus, I guess it was 15 houses, as I had heard before, could potentially change the traffic patterns. I know in the morning, the Southern Boulevard Hill does get backed up during heavy commuting times, and what has been proposed to alleviate congestion and as well as deal with the impacts that would be on the borough, just as we're neighbors and partners in the community.
Those are details at the planning board,
Okay.
and there will be public hearings regarding that. There will be traffic studies made.
And would the traffic studies be done by, I assume the developer, but also would the township consider engaging a traffic engineer as well to, to do their own study and evaluate the potential impacts that could be, significant?
You are correct. The developer typically presents the first traffic study. It's reviewed by the municipal engineer and the traffic engineer. Whether or not the planning board decides to commission its own traffic study is for the planning board to make that determination and not the township committee.
Okay, understood. And just a question for the township committee. Have you engaged with the Chatham Borough Town Committee and Mayor as well to discuss this and the potential impacts that are facing Chatham Borough?
I certainly talked to Bruce a lot about parking at the train station, I'll tell you that much.
But
And
have there been
he
any-
has asked, and I've had conversations with him, I served with him on the library board of trustees, and without going into great detail, of course, what are you guys doing up there? And I always say, what are you doing in the M district? And, and it's kind of one of those broader conversations without any specifics, because, until now, we're getting towards the specific time.
Right, and perhaps it's a time for both groups to engage as one community and discuss.
And I've also discussed it with the borough engineer and the borough administrator and kind of presented the concept plan to them. Likewise, they've presented to me the concept plan for the railroad plaza and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So we have a very close working relationship with the borough. We partner in a lot of stuff, So if there are people that think we don't communicate, that's just
Nonsense.
not correct.
I was just asking just in general.
No, I understand.
I'm new to hearing about this.
Well, that's the
But
problem, you've been
there is-
hearing about it.
Well, I know, and certainly that's on me, not,
No,
in terms of what's
certain
in the
individuals.
communications. But, I just wanted to just pose
Yeah,
those
but
questions.
all those questions will be answered. The developer, I think, has already, at the planning board, touched on the issue of traffic volumes. They have a pretty good idea from being in the business what a development of this size generates in terms of trips, at peak hours and that sort of stuff. So they'll be well prepared, I think, to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come before? All right, we'll now close out the hearing of citizens. Greg, would you please read the executive resolution?
Resolution 2017-P-15, resolution of the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham in the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, authorizing conference of the Township Committee with public excluded. Whereas NJSA 10:4-12 of the Open Public Meetings Act permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Committee of the Township of Chatham, County of Morris, State of New Jersey as follows. The public shall be excluded from discussion of the specified subject matter. The general nature of the subject matter to be discussed is as follows. Litigation in the matter of the Township of Chatham for a judgment of compliance of its third round housing element and fair share plan, docket number MRS-L-1659-15. It is anticipated that the minutes on the subject matter of the executive session will be made public upon conclusion of the matter under discussion, and in any event when appropriate pursuant to NJSA 10:4-7 and 4-13. The committee will come back into regular session and may take further action. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Solen?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mayor Ritter?
Yes. Thanks for coming out tonight.